You ever love someone so much that you start to lose pieces of yourself just trying to keep them whole? That's how it's been with my wife, Rachel. We met in a grocery store checkout line, of all places, her struggling to balance a dozen eggs and a box of wine in her arms, me offering a hand and getting a smile in return that I swear could have thawed an Alaskan winter. She was electric, brilliant, funny in the kind of way that was just for me. But that was 6 years ago. A long way from now. These days, she doesn't smile so easy. And when she does, it's usually followed by a shudder, like she remembered something terrible right after. I've caught her locking the door 3 times in a row, unplugging the microwave at night, checking the windows with a flashlight like she's waiting for someone to crawl in. They're watching us, she told me once, whispering like the walls were listening. I don't know who yet, but I know it. They want to hurt me. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Everyone's a little paranoid now and then. But over time, it stopped being occasional and started being constant. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and find her sitting on the couch, staring at the front door with a butcher knife in her lap. Once, she accused our mailman of poisoning our water because he waved at her too cheerfully. And the cheating, well, that started about a year in. The first time, she confessed through tears. Said she was scared. Said the guy promised to protect her, that he understood the danger. She claimed he was part of some secret society, someone who could shield her from them. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I ended up doing both. I've been called a lot of things in my life, overbearing, hard-nosed, cocky. But crazy? That was a new one. At least, until her mother came along. Linda always had a way of making me feel like the dog who peed on the rug. Sharp tongue, colder smile. From the beginning, I could tell she didn't think I was good enough for her daughter. When Rachel's paranoia kicked into high gear, Linda saw her opportunity. She told friends that I drove her baby girl insane. Claimed I was controlling, emotionally abusive, even violent. Then came the papers. I remember the knock on the door. Some skinny guy in a blazer with a clipboard and a half-smile said, "You've been served." I opened the envelope and nearly laughed, petition for psychiatric evaluation. Linda had hired a lawyer and was trying to get the court to force me into treatment. The grounds? Potentially dangerous behavior and signs of delusional disorder. Oh, the irony. She thought she could out-lawyer me. See, what Linda and her suit-wearing puppet forgot is that I used to be one of the top trial attorneys in the state. I gave it up when Rachel and I got married, thinking I'd chase a simpler life. But courtroom instincts? They don't just vanish. They sleep like old lions, waiting for the right fight. And buddy, this was the right fight. I didn't yell. I didn't storm over to Linda's house or throw a tantrum. I built my case, carefully. Just like I used to. I gathered Rachel's medical records, journal entries, appointment logs. I even had a neighbor record one of Rachel's 2 a.m. porch rants about the satellites watching her. It wasn't to humiliate her, it was to protect her. And me. Because the truth is, I still loved her. Even after she slept with a guy she met at a gas station because he smelled like military secrets. Even after she accused my barber of bugging our house. Even after she vanished for 3 days and came back saying she'd been in a bunker under the library. I forgave her. Every time. Not because I'm weak. Not because I'm a fool. But because she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was sick. And nobody else seemed willing to see that. I remember one night, about a month ago. She came home late. Smelled like cigarette smoke and cheap cologne. Eyes red like she'd been crying, or maybe just not sleeping. I didn't ask questions. I just sat her down on the porch swing and wrapped her in a blanket. She didn't speak for a long time. Then finally she whispered, "Do you ever think I'm insane?" I looked her straight in the eye and said, "No. I think you're scared. And I'm here. That was the night she didn't run. That was the night she fell asleep on my chest and didn't bolt upright at 3 a.m. But that didn't last long. The next morning, Linda called and asked if I'd packed my bags yet, said she had a place lined up for Rachel and a lawyer that eats men like me for breakfast. I told her to chew on this. I'd countersue for slander and emotional distress. That shut her up. Thing is, I wasn't bluffing. I'd spent years in court, peeling back the lies of CEOs and con men with one hand behind my back. If Linda thought she could throw me in a padded room and walk off into the sunset with my wife and her delusions, she was dead wrong. But the real war? That was still ahead. Rachel's slipping further, and every day feels like holding sand with my bare hands. I'm trying to keep her world from caving in, but I can feel it shaking, cracking around the edges. And as much as I want to believe love is enough, sometimes I wonder if even that has a limit. Linda didn't waste any time. 3 days after her little phone stunt, I got a letter from a firm in the next town over, Jensen and Harper. I'd heard of them back in my days in court. Jensen, the senior partner, used to handle land disputes and family trusts. But Harper, the junior, was something else. Fresh out of Yale, full of piss and swagger, known for attacking character like a vulture. Apparently, Linda wanted him to pick the bones off mine. The letter was crisp and full of threat-drenched formalities. It demanded a psychiatric evaluation, temporary separation, and protective relief measures for Rachel. Protective relief. Like I was some damn predator hiding in her closet. What got me wasn't the accusation. It was the smugness of it all, how easily Linda turned my wife's illness into a legal weapon. I could almost see her, wine glass in one hand, gloating about saving her daughter while making me look like the monster. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stayed up rereading Rachel's old texts. The ones from when we were just dating. So full of light and laughter, back when she used to make me mixtapes and talk about starting a family. I missed that version of her. And I knew, buried under all the layers of fear and delusion, she was still in there somewhere. The next morning, I dusted off my old briefcase. I called my former paralegal, Dee, who now worked part-time at a local bakery. She almost dropped her phone when she heard my voice. "Please tell me you're not going back into court," she said. "Just this once," I told her. "It's personal." Dee was in. She always had my back, and she still knew how to dig up information like nobody else. First thing we did was draft a formal response to Harper's letter. I didn't just deny the claims, I dismantled them. Point by point. I cited case law, quoted diagnostic criteria for persecutory delusions, and attached records from Rachel's last psychiatrist, Dr. Kern, who'd retired just 2 months ago. His last notes clearly mentioned Rachel's paranoid episodes, delusional ideation, and her consistent detachment from reality. Then I filed a motion for court-mandated psychiatric evaluation, but not for me. For Rachel. It was a risky move. I didn't want to humiliate her. But I had to push back. Linda's plan wasn't just to hurt me, it was to erase me from Rachel's life. I knew the court wouldn't approve anything without evidence, so I also attached a series of home videos. Quiet ones. Rachel triple locking the door. Rachel whispering to herself in the bathroom mirror. Rachel pointing at the sky, insisting there were messages hidden in the clouds. And I wrote a letter. Not to the court. Not to the lawyer. To Rachel. I left it by her bed one night, tucked in the book she always kept on her nightstand, the bell jar. I figured she'd open it eventually. The letter said, "Rach. I know you think the world's closing in. I know it's hard to trust anyone, even me. But I see you. I've always seen you. I remember the girl who made me laugh when my father died. The woman who danced in our kitchen barefoot on Sunday mornings. I know you're scared. And I know sometimes that fear makes you run. But I'm still here. Not because I'm trapped. Not because I'm deluded. Because I choose to be. And if one day you find your way back through the fog, I'll still be here. On the porch. Light on. 2 days later, I came home and found her sitting on the floor in the kitchen, clutching the letter. Her eyes were red. She didn't say a word. Just got up, hugged me, and whispered, "I don't know why I keep doing this." I didn't either. But I held her anyway. That night, we ate grilled cheese and watched an old black and white detective movie. For a couple of hours, it felt almost normal. She even laughed when I burned the sandwich. Then, at 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of her sobbing in the bathroom. I didn't go in. I just sat outside the door and listened. She kept saying the same thing over and over. "They're going to kill him. They're going to kill him, and it'll be my fault." 3 days later was our first hearing. It wasn't a trial, just a preliminary session to review the petition and determine whether a formal psych evaluation of me would be granted. I wore my old gray suit. Fit a little tighter than it used to, but it still gave me that feeling, like armor. Harper showed up looking like he'd just stepped out of a fashion catalog. Slick hair, expensive tie, smug as ever. He gave me a nod that dripped with condescension. He stood and rattled off his arguments with precision, painting me as a mentally unstable husband who was endangering a vulnerable woman. He even threw in a quote from one of Rachel's diary entries that Linda had given him, something about me watching her sleep and tracking her phone. I stood up calmly. And I gutted every argument he made. I showed the court the pattern of delusions, the medical evidence, the videos. I quoted Dr. Kern's notes, showing how Rachel often misinterpreted normal behavior as threats. I even read the portion of her diary that followed the "watching her sleep" line, which continued, "But I think he does it because he's worried. Because he loves me." I saw Harper's expression shift, just a twitch, just a flicker, but I knew I had him. The judge postponed the decision. Asked for an independent medical review of both parties. It wasn't a win. Not yet. But it was enough to keep Linda from taking Rachel away. That night, Rachel didn't come home. I waited. Midnight. 2:05. She walked in just after sunrise, eyes hollow, mascara streaked. She didn't explain. Just said, "I needed to see if someone could protect me better than you." It crushed me. But I just nodded. "I get it," I said. "But no one loves you like I do." She broke down. Collapsed right there in the entryway. And I held her again. Same way I always did. I didn't ask where she'd been. I knew what "needed to see if someone could protect me better than you" meant. She wasn't walking in at sunrise because she was out on a jog or hiding in some motel lobby out of fear. No, she'd slept beside someone else again, probably someone she convinced herself could save her from the assassins in the mirror. That was Rachel's world now, a reality where enemies lived in every corner, and the only thing louder than the whispers in her head was the silence in our bed. Still, I made her coffee. The kind she liked, honey instead of sugar, almond milk instead of cream. Her hands shook when she took it. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded but didn't say a word. I knew it wasn't her talking. Not really. It was the illness. That damned illness had turned her into a scared, restless ghost who needed strangers' arms more than her husband's presence. I left for a walk after that. I needed the air. The town hadn't changed much. Same broken sidewalks, same storefronts pretending they weren't dying. I passed the diner where Rachel and I had our first date. She was 22, fresh out of college, with a head full of dreams and boots that didn't match her dress. She ordered waffles and talked about traveling to Prague. We never made it to Prague. Hell, we barely made it past Kansas City on our last road trip before the fear took over. Halfway down Main Street, my phone buzzed. It was Dee. "Got something you need to see," she said. I met her in a borrowed office space above the bakery. She'd printed out a stack of emails, texts, and photos. All of them connected to Harper and Linda. "You're not gonna like this," she warned. Turns out Linda wasn't just trying to protect her daughter, she was trying to protect her money. Rachel's father had left behind a sizable trust that was locked away behind guardianship clauses. If Rachel were declared mentally unfit and I were out of the picture, Linda could step in as conservator and legally control it. That explained the urgency. That explained the high-powered lawyer and the rush to paint me as the crazy one. This wasn't just about Rachel's mental health, it was about Linda's greed hiding behind a veil of motherly concern. One email stood out. From Harper to Linda. "If we can establish prolonged emotional trauma, we have a case. Her husband's background in law is a concern, but I've dug up some personal history that could play well in court if pushed." "Personal history?" I asked, furrowing my brow. Dee hesitated. "You ever tell anyone about the Carter case?" I closed my eyes. "That damn case. The one that made me walk away from law entirely. 6 years ago, I defended a client I knew was guilty. He walked. 3 months later, he killed someone. I never forgave myself. I quit the next morning, shredded my license, and never looked back. Now Harper was trying to use it as leverage. Twist my guilt into instability. Well, two could play that game. Back home, Rachel was in the backyard, sitting barefoot in the grass, staring at the neighbor's cat like it was plotting her death. I sat beside her. "They're going to try and take you from me," she said. "Who is?" "My mother. That new lawyer. Everyone." I didn't deny it. "Do you want to go?" I asked. She turned to me slowly, eyes wide. "No. Then we fight." She blinked. "How can I fight when I don't even know what's real?" "Then I'll fight for you," I said. "You just hang on." She cried again. God, I'd seen this woman cry more times than I could count. But this time was different. It felt like she wasn't crying because she was broken. She was crying because she was tired of being broken. The second court appearance was scheduled a week later. This one was more formal, witnesses, arguments, and recommendations from the psychiatric reviewers. I knew the judge was leaning neutral, but Linda had arranged for Rachel to testify. That scared the hell out of me. Rachel couldn't testify. Not in her state. But if she didn't, Linda would argue that I was manipulating her, silencing her. And if she did, she'd unravel on the stand. Either way, I stood to lose. But Rachel surprised me. She walked into that courtroom with her hair pulled back and her mother's necklace around her throat like armor. I caught her eyes from the table. She looked unsure, trembling. But she stood. Harper rose. "Miss Atwood, can you tell us in your own words what your husband has put you through?" Rachel's eyes darted to Linda, then to me. Then to the floor. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Then finally said, "He hasn't put me through anything." My mind did. The whole room hushed. Harper cleared his throat. "Rachel, with all due respect." "No," she cut in. "You want me to say he's the reason I feel hunted? That he stalks me or tracks me or hurts me? But he doesn't. I do that to myself. My brain does that. I cheat on him. I lie. I vanish. But he still comes home every night." She turned to Linda. "Mom, you want him gone. You think he's the problem. But he's the only reason I'm still here." Linda's face went pale. I couldn't breathe. Rachel looked back at the judge and said, "Please. Don't take him away from me. If you do, I won't survive it." They didn't take me away. The court appointed a neutral medical conservator to review Rachel's mental health for 6 months, and I agreed to joint supervision if Rachel relapsed. Linda left in a storm of perfume and whispered curses. Harper never made eye contact with me as he packed his briefcase and slithered out. As for Rachel, she didn't go back to the man she'd spent that sunrise with. I never asked who he was. I didn't want to know. Some things, even in love, need to stay buried to heal. I'm not naive. I know her illness isn't gone. Some nights she still checks under the bed. Some days she still whispers to herself, convinced the neighbors are planting bugs in our flower beds. But I'm here. Still cooking her burnt grilled cheese. Still watching old detective movies with her on rainy evenings. Still showing up. Because when you marry someone, you don't just marry their best. You marry their worst, too. And maybe forgiveness isn't a victory. Maybe it's just choosing love in a world that constantly gives you reasons not to. The morning after the court hearing, Rachel didn't get out of bed. Not until well past noon. She lay there curled in the blankets, her eyes blinking slowly like she was still waiting for someone to bust down the door. I brought her toast and water. She pushed the plate away but held my hand like it was the only solid thing left in the world. I thought I did okay, she whispered. You did better than okay, I said, sitting down beside her. You told the truth. She nodded. It didn't feel like winning. Just felt like bleeding in front of everyone. That stuck with me. Rachel had stood up in court, yes, but at what cost? Everyone saw her cracked open, laid bare like a lab sample. Her illness wasn't a quiet struggle anymore. It had a case number now. A diagnosis in a file, and a timeline attached to it. I watched her sleep that afternoon. I listened to the wind knocking against the siding and wondered if it'd ever stop feeling like I was standing between her and a storm only she could see. A week later, the first conservator showed up. Dr. Erin Page. Young, polite, clipboard tucked under her arm like a badge. She had a calm way about her, the kind that could make even the most paranoid person feel like maybe they weren't being hunted after all. Rachel didn't like her at first. Didn't trust anyone with a clipboard. She's here to spy, she muttered as we made tea in the kitchen. Probably recording everything. She's not, I said gently. She's too nice, Rachel said. Nice people are the ones who kill you in your sleep. I didn't argue. I just stood close, let her fume, and hoped she'd warm up. To my surprise, she did. After a few visits, Rachel started letting Dr. Page in a little at a time, talking about the shadows she thought she saw outside the window, the cars that drove past too slowly. Page listened without judgment, writing only when Rachel let her. I like her, Rachel said one night as we folded laundry. She doesn't flinch when I talk crazy. You're not crazy, I said. Rachel gave me a look. Okay, I admitted, you're just a little battle-worn. She smiled for the first time in days. Meanwhile, Linda wasn't done. I got a letter in the mail from Harper, thinly veiled legal threats about my continued influence, and how my cohabitation with Rachel could violate the spirit of the court's ruling. I knew it was a scare tactic. They were trying to bait me into slipping up, into being aggressive or unstable. One outburst, and they could haul me back into court with some new angle. I didn't bite. Instead, I called Dee. I want everything on Harper, I told her. Every case, every dirty client, every trick. Dig deep. She chuckled. You really are dusting off the old playbook, huh? You bet your ass I am. We weren't in a courtroom anymore, but it felt like war just the same. And while I might have hung up my lawyer coat years ago, I hadn't forgotten how to fight smart. That Friday, Rachel and I tried something new. A dinner out. Just a simple Italian place on Maple Avenue. Nothing fancy. But it felt like a mountain climb. She sat by the wall so she could see the door. kept checking the windows. Flinched when someone at another table laughed too loud. But she stayed. She didn't run. And after a glass of red wine and half a plate of gnocchi, she leaned toward me and whispered, "You ever think we'll be okay?" I didn't lie. Some days, yes. Other days, not even close. She smiled. Thanks for not pretending. On the way home, she held my hand. No words. Just fingers curled together like maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't out to get her tonight. The next week brought another storm. Rachel disappeared. Not for long. Just overnight. Her phone was off. Her coat was gone. I called Dee, I called Paige, I even called Linda, though I knew damn well she wouldn't answer. Then, just after dawn, I heard the front door creak open. Rachel stumbled in, her clothes damp from the rain, mascara smudged like war paint. "I'm sorry," she said, voice cracking. I needed to feel like I could disappear if I had to. My jaw clenched. "Did you sleep with someone?" She didn't answer. Just looked down. "I'm trying," she said. "But sometimes my brain tells me you're one of them." "One of who?" "The ones who want me gone." I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch a wall or crawl into bed and pretend the world didn't exist. But instead, I took a breath. "You didn't answer the question." She met my eyes. "Yes," she said finally. "But I didn't want to. I panicked. I thought dying in a stranger's bed was safer than waking up here again, afraid." That cut deeper than anything. She didn't cheat because she wanted love. She cheated because her illness convinced her that I was the enemy. That our home was poison. And yet, she came back. She still came back. That night, while she showered the sins off her skin, I stood at the mirror and stared at my own reflection. Who was I now? A man living with betrayal on a loop? A fool clinging to someone who'd tear herself apart before letting me catch her? Or maybe, just maybe, I was still the man who saw her, not the illness. The man who promised something in sickness and in health and meant it. I didn't know. But I knew I wasn't giving up. Not yet. The day started with eggs and ended in fire. Not literal fire, but the kind that chews through your nerves like a lit match dropped in dry brush. It was supposed to be a quiet morning. Rachel sat across from me, picking at her breakfast while the radio hummed low in the background. Her eyes were tired. She'd barely said 3 words since the night she disappeared and came back soaked in someone else's perfume and guilt. I didn't push. She was still here. Sometimes, that was enough. Until Linda called. "Thought you should know," she said with that voice of hers, sweet like syrup but sharp underneath. Harper's filed a motion. Emergency. Claims you're mentally unfit to be living with Rachel. I stared out the window. A squirrel scrambled along the fence, looking for an escape. "When?" I asked. "Today. 1 hour. Of course." She sighed. "She's playing dirty now. Wants full conservatorship rights transferred to her. And if she gets them? She could lock Rachel in a facility tomorrow. Or worse, medicate her until she forgets her own name." I hung up. I didn't tell Rachel right away. She was brushing her hair in the mirror, mumbling softly to herself, something about shadows under the sink. "Do you feel safe with me?" I asked suddenly. She blinked. "What?" "Here. With me. In this house." Her hand stilled on the brush. "Most of the time," she whispered. "And the other times." I try to remember the truth, not just the fear. That was enough. I kissed her cheek, slipped on my blazer, and told her I had to run a quick errand. The courthouse smelled like mildew and anxiety. I walked in alone, no tie, no fancy briefcase, just the quiet confidence of a man who used to run circles around prosecutors for fun. Harper was already there, standing with Linda and a conservator I'd never seen before. Clean-cut guy, nervous twitch in his eye. He looked like he'd never dealt with anything messier than unpaid rent. The judge, a stiff man named Colton, tapped his gavel and we began. Harper stood. Your Honor, the petitioner presents evidence that Mr. Matthews, due to an unstable emotional temperament, poses a danger to Rachel Matthews' recovery. We ask that he be removed from her residence immediately and barred from unsupervised contact. The judge looked my way. Mr. Matthews, how do you respond? I stood slowly. Your Honor, I said, voice low but clear, I was one of the top defense attorneys in this state for 15 years. I've cross-examined CEOs, cracked alibi chains, exposed perjury in 3 languages. But what I've never done, until now, is fight for the right to love someone who sees danger in every corner. I looked at Harper, then back to the bench. Yes, my wife is ill. But I am not. I am calm. I am stable. I am patient. And I have endured more psychological warfare in the past 6 months than most people see in a lifetime. Colton raised an eyebrow. That sounds rehearsed. It's not. But if you'd like, I can keep going until it does. A chuckle from someone in the back row. Colton sighed. Do you have any evidence that Rachel supports your continued presence in her life? I nodded. Yes, sir. She wrote this morning. I handed over the folded sheet of paper Rachel had slipped into my coat pocket before I left. I hadn't read it. Didn't want to. Colton opened it. Read silently. Eyes narrowed. Then he cleared his throat and read aloud. He is my light when the world screams danger. When I can't tell if I'm being followed or just afraid of my own shadow, he holds me without asking for explanations. I have betrayed him, feared him, doubted him, but he is still here. That's not weakness. That's love. And I choose it. The courtroom was silent. Harper looked like she'd swallowed her tongue. Colton tapped the gavel once. Motion denied. Mr. Matthews may remain with his wife. Any further attempts to override this conservatorship arrangement without new, compelling evidence will be considered harassment. Dismissed. I walked out of that building lighter than I'd felt in months. But the relief didn't last long. When I got home, Rachel was sitting on the kitchen floor. Her arms were wrapped around her knees. Her face was blank, tearless. They're watching again, she said. Who? She pointed at the ceiling. The ones with wires. I told them I picked you. That you're not part of the kill team. But they didn't believe me. I sat beside her and pulled her close. What if I told you I am part of the kill team, but I defected? She looked up at me slowly. You'd do that? For you? I smiled. I'd lie to God. She leaned into me, eyes fluttering shut. And just like that, the war was quiet again. Later that night, as I watched her sleep, I thought about all the ways I could have walked away. And all the ways I still might, someday, if this battle ever asked for more than I had left to give. But for now, I wasn't going anywhere. Not because I was some saint or martyr. Because she was mine. And even in her darkest moments, she never stopped reaching for me. Even when her mind screamed, run, her heart whispered, stay. And so I stayed. A week passed. Rachel had more good days than bad, which in our world was a quiet miracle. She even came with me to the farmer's market on Sunday, wrapped in my old college hoodie, hair tucked beneath a ball cap like she was hiding from the cameras only she could see. And maybe she was. But she smiled. She reached for my hand in public. We bought peaches. I was starting to believe we might actually claw our way back from this strange, foggy edge of madness. That maybe forgiveness had teeth strong enough to anchor a marriage that had weathered betrayal, mental illness, and the weight of other people's judgment. But healing's never that easy. Especially when someone's trying to dig a fresh wound just as the old ones start to scar over. On Tuesday, a letter arrived. No return address. No postage mark. Just slid under the front door sometime between 2 and 3 p.m. Rachel was napping, so I opened it alone at the kitchen table. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, black and white like it came off a security cam. But it was clear enough. Rachel. Outside a gas station. Laughing. With him. Same guy from the motel. Same man I hadn't seen since the night she came home drenched in shame and dollar store perfume. And below the photo, a typed message. How many times does it take before you finally realize she wants someone who isn't you? I didn't flinch. Didn't curse. Didn't even tear the letter in half like I wanted to. Instead, I placed it in a manila folder, walked it to the shed, and added it to the others. There were 5 now. Anonymous letters. Photos. A voicemail once that was just 30 seconds of heavy breathing followed by a man whispering, "You'll never be enough." This wasn't just paranoia anymore. Someone was trying to push me out. Or push me over the edge. And it wasn't just about Rachel. It was about control. About power. I'd seen it before, in courtrooms, in high-rise divorces, in bitter business dissolutions. But never in my own home. That night, I made a decision. If someone wanted to play games with me, I'd show them how games were really played. Because I didn't just survive those 15 years as a top-tier attorney, I thrived by studying people who lied for a living. I knew how to find their cracks. How to watch, wait, and strike when the truth mattered most. And I knew exactly where to start. The next morning, I visited Harper's office. She wasn't expecting me. I walked in with a smile and a bakery box of muffins from that cafe she always pretended not to like but secretly adored. "Thought we should talk," I said. She narrowed her eyes. "We have nothing to discuss unless it's through counsel." I opened the box and pulled out a blueberry muffin. "Then fire your lawyer. Because this is personal." Harper crossed her arms. "You're not welcome here." "I'm not here for your welcome. I'm here for the truth." She scoffed. "You wouldn't know truth if it bit you." I leaned in just a little. "You sent the letters, didn't you? Or maybe your little assistant. Or maybe that man Rachel keeps slipping away with. But make no mistake, when I find out who's doing it, I'll drag their name through court so slow and painful they'll wish they'd gone to prison instead." She blinked. For a split second, her lips parted like she wanted to deny it, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. Just enough doubt to confirm what I suspected. I turned to leave. "Thanks for the muffin company." Back home, Rachel was waiting at the kitchen table. The letter was in her hand. "I found this," she said quietly. I sat across from her. She didn't look angry. Or ashamed. Just defeated. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't remember that day. I know I should, but it's all noise. Like someone else's memory." I reached for her hand. "I believe you." Her eyes filled. "You should hate me." "I don't. I don't even know why I did the things I did." "I do," I said. "Because something in you felt hunted. Like every kindness was a trap. And when someone came along offering chaos, it felt more honest than love." She covered her face with both hands. "I'm so broken." "No," I said gently. "You're not. You're just hurt. And people who are hurt don't need judgment. They need someone who doesn't flinch when the damage shows." I stood, pulled her into my arms, and held her until her sobs slowed. "I'm going to fix this," I said. She pulled back. How? I looked her in the eyes. By becoming the man I used to be. The man who made liars confess on the stand and walked out of courtrooms with juries in his pocket. But this isn't court. No, I said. It's war. And I just found my armor. That night, after she fell asleep, I returned to the shed. I opened that manila folder again. Examined every letter, every photo, every tiny clue. And this time, I saw it. A smudge on the back of the newest letter. A partial fingerprint. I smiled. Whoever had started this thought they were clever. But they'd made one mistake. They forgot who they were dealing with. The smudged print on the back of that letter lit a fuse in me. I didn't sleep that night, not because of the insomnia that used to stalk me during trial weeks, but because my mind was burning with names, patterns, and tactics. Everything I used to thrive on before my life narrowed to caring for Rachel, watching her slip in and out of herself. But now? Now I was back. I knew someone was behind this harassment. Someone who knew just enough about Rachel's condition and my past to be dangerous. And I had a hunch the answer was in those letters, but I needed help confirming the print. I drove to see an old friend the next morning, Tommy Griggs. We worked together on a couple of big cases years ago. He stayed in the game long after I stepped away, and now he ran a quiet private investigative firm in a strip mall behind a coffee shop and a dry cleaner. Jesus, if it isn't the courtroom cowboy himself, Tommy grinned, standing up when I walked in. You finally crawling back to the dark side? Not quite, I said, setting the folder on his desk. I need a favor. He flipped through the photos and letters, letting out a low whistle. Somebody's got a real grudge against you, huh? I pointed to the smudge on the letter. Think you can lift a print? Tommy nodded. I can try. Got a guy who still does some freelance work for the force. Give me a couple days. As I stood to leave, he glanced at the last photo, the one with Rachel and the man at the gas station. His brow furrowed. Wait a second. You recognize him? He tapped the picture. I think so. Let me ask around. I left his office feeling lighter. Maybe for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't just reacting to things, like I was doing something. That night, Rachel was in the bath when her mother called again. I let it go to voicemail, but she didn't leave one. She just sent a text instead. You still have a chance to do the right thing. Let her go before you hurt her again. I stared at the screen. That woman still believed I was the one unraveling Rachel's mind. Still pushing the idea that I was a dangerous husband, an unstable man grasping for control. She'd hired a lawyer, hadn't she? Fine. She could throw her case together however she liked. But she'd forgotten something critical. I wrote the playbook they were trying to use against me. And I wasn't afraid to burn every page of it if that's what it took to protect Rachel. 2 days later, Tommy called. You're gonna want to come in for this. I drove over without asking questions. When I walked in, he didn't offer coffee or small talk. He just dropped a photo on the desk and pointed. That's your guy, he said. Name's Levi Miles. Used to be a freelance nurse's aide, worked on and off in some psych facilities. The name didn't ring any bells. Tommy continued, got fired 2 years ago for crossing some boundaries with a patient, nothing ever stuck, but the whispers were there. And get this, he briefly worked at the private clinic where your wife got her initial diagnosis. My gut clenched. So he had access to her file? Tommy nodded. More than that. He had access to her one-on-one sessions. Escorting her from her room to the doctor's. That kind of thing. And now he's showing up in photos with her. Following her. Slipping her God knows what. Manipulating her when she's vulnerable. Tommy leaned in. Looks like he's got some kind of obsession. That night, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I sat across from Rachel in the living room. She was flipping through one of her old scrapbooks, pictures of us from Tahoe, a wedding we went to in Austin, lazy road trips and motel waffles. "Rachel," I said softly. She looked up, eyes glassy. Do you remember a man named Levi? From the clinic?" Her brow furrowed. "Levi." She repeated it like it was a word in another language. Then something shifted. A flash of fear. She stood up quickly, the scrapbook falling to the floor. "No. I don't want to talk about him. Don't say his name in this house." I stood too. "Honey." She backed away from me like I'd drawn a weapon. "He's not real. He's just another hallucination, right? That's what they said. He's not real." I walked to her slowly, gently, like I would approach a wounded animal. "He is real, Rachel. And he's been stalking you. Manipulating you. He's the one sending these letters. The photos." She covered her ears. "Stop." I didn't stop. Because the truth needed to be named, even if it hurt. "You weren't crazy, Rachel. He was gaslighting you. Feeding the fear. Making sure you stayed paranoid so he could get close. You didn't imagine him, he was always there." She dropped to her knees, sobbing. And for the first time in a long time, I saw the root of her illness, not just a chemical imbalance or some phantom disorder, but a real trauma. A violation of her mind and safety by someone she should have been able to trust. I knelt beside her and held her as she broke. Later that night, when she finally fell asleep, I returned to the kitchen and opened my laptop. I drafted an email to Harper's attorney. Subject: Discovery Request. Attached were copies of the letters, the fingerprint analysis, and a background file on Levi Miles. Then I added a note at the end. "I trust your client will see fit to drop her baseless claim that I endangered my wife's mental health. Any further action taken against me will be met with full legal retaliation. I'd advise against poking the bear again." In the morning, Rachel came downstairs slowly, quietly. She looked tired, but something behind her eyes had shifted. "I want to fight this," she said. "I want to be strong again." "You already are," I told her. "No," she shook her head. "I want to fight him. I want to remember what he did. I want to make sure he never does it to anyone else." And right then, I knew. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about justice. The next few days were something between a storm and a slow burn. Rachel and I barely left the house, but that didn't mean we weren't fighting. She fought through the fog that Levi had planted in her brain, trying to untangle what was real, what was twisted, what had been manipulated into madness. And I fought in a quieter way, on the computer, on the phone, through folders and files and memory. When I said I used to be a big-time lawyer, I meant it. Not flashy or TV famous, but respected. I knew how to build a case from scraps. And this one? It was coming together. Tommy had tracked down 2 more women who remembered Levi from the clinic. One of them, a former patient herself, said he used to bring her gifts, little things like lip balm and snacks, but always with notes that said things like, "Don't trust the nurses or they want to erase your mind." Sound familiar? Rachel's journal from back then said the same things. Almost word for word. He'd used fear like a scalpel, cutting her off from everyone who might have helped. I wanted to kill him. But that wasn't the kind of war I was trained for. Mine was fought with paper, pressure, and precision. Rachel's mother, Harper, didn't back down immediately. Her lawyer responded to my discovery email with a short, arrogant reply. "We believe these materials have been fabricated. If Mr. Kingsley has further evidence, we request he present it formally through the proper channels." I stared at the screen and smiled. Proper channels, huh? You want proper? I'll give you a damn masterpiece. Tommy and I went all in. We filed for a formal inquiry with the state licensing board over Levi's actions and history. I prepped a civil suit against him for damages and psychological abuse. I even drafted a complaint about Harper's lawyer for unethical behavior, since she kept pushing Rachel into interviews and assessments while knowingly feeding her falsehoods. The legal field might be cold, but it still has nerves. And I was going to press on every single one of them. Rachel had her own battles going. She started therapy again, real therapy, not the parade of doctors Harper had steered her toward in the past. We found a woman named Dr. Lopez who specialized in trauma and delusional disorders, but without over-pathologizing everything. And Rachel liked her. Trusted her. The first real sign of progress was simple, but powerful. She came into the living room one evening, holding her phone. I blocked him, she said. Levi? She nodded. His number. His social media. Everything. I don't care if part of me still believes he's in the walls or following me in his truck, I'm done letting him in. I stood up and walked to her. That's strength, I said quietly. She looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw my wife, not the shell he had hollowed out. You still love me, after everything? Of course I do. Even with what I did. The other men? I thought you were against me. I believed. I didn't let her finish. I forgave you, I said. And not because I'm some saint. Because I know what fear can do to a person. I saw it. You were drowning, and no one threw you a rope. Not even me, at first. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I want to be whole again, she whispered. You will be. One night, a week later, I got a call from Tommy. Guess who showed up outside Rachel's old clinic last night? I gripped the phone. Levi? Yup. Guy was parked outside for 3 hours. One of the night nurses reported it to security. They called me after reviewing the tapes. Is he still there? No. But he's slipping. Creeps like this, they can only stay in the shadows for so long before they want to be seen. You were right. He's trying to get back into her head. My mind clicked through a dozen strategies, gears turning fast. He wants her to spiral, I said. If she does, the suit gets dropped, and Harper keeps pushing the narrative that I'm the one destabilizing her. Tommy was quiet for a beat. You really think her mom's still behind it? She might not be pulling every string, I said. But she's still cheering from the sidelines. And she's desperate to keep the world believing I broke Rachel, because if that falls apart, her control does, too. I confronted Harper the next morning. She was already waiting on the porch when I arrived, probably heard I was coming through some grapevine. Well, she said, arms crossed. If it isn't the ghost of courtrooms past. I didn't rise to her tone. You need to tell your lawyer to drop the insanity case, I said calmly. We're days away from exposing Levi for what he is. Rachel's finally seeing the truth. If you keep pushing this narrative, you'll go down with him. Her lip curled. You're bluffing. She's still unwell. You can't fix delusions with a few bedtime stories. I stepped closer. You made her sicker, Harper. You fed the fire because it made you feel powerful. But this ends now. Because if you push me into a corner again, I will bury you with affidavits, depositions, and subpoenas until even your garden club knows what you did. She turned red, sputtering. You wouldn't dare. I leaned in. I'm a lawyer who walked away from a career where people paid me to destroy reputations. Now I have a personal reason. Do the math. She didn't say another word. Just turned and walked back into the house like a woman who had finally realized she was losing. That night, Rachel and I lit a candle on the back porch. She was wearing the same hoodie she used to wear when we'd go camping, the one with a moth hole on the sleeve. Her fingers laced through mine. "I want to testify," she said suddenly. I looked over. "Testify? In court? Against Levi? I want to be the one to say it out loud. You don't have to put yourself through that. But I need to," she said. "To take the fear back. To tell the truth, not just to the court, but to myself." I nodded slowly. And deep in my chest, something cracked open. Hope. Real, stubborn, painful, beautiful hope. She was coming back. And this time, she wasn't just surviving. She was fighting. I'll tell you something about courtrooms. They're not as dramatic as TV makes them seem, at least, not on the surface. No screaming matches or surprise witnesses every 10 minutes. Most of the time, it's just paperwork and people in suits repeating things everyone already knows. But sometimes, just sometimes, you get a moment that punches through all that silence and hits everybody square in the chest. That's what happened when Rachel took the stand. It was the pre-trial hearing for our civil case against Levi Cray. Our team had filed a restraining order and sought preliminary damages for emotional manipulation, undue influence, and professional misconduct. Nothing fancy, just enough to crack open the dam. I didn't even have to argue this part. My old friend, Eddie Morse, had stepped in as lead counsel, while I sat in the back with my hands clasped and my heart going 80 miles an hour. Rachel wore a navy blouse, one she'd picked out herself. She looked, not like her old self, exactly, but maybe like a version of herself that had crawled through hell and learned how to keep walking anyway. When they swore her in, she didn't flinch. When they asked her about Levi, she didn't hesitate. "I was sick," she said, her voice steady. "I've struggled with delusional paranoia for years. But he didn't help me. He made it worse. He told me that my husband was watching me. That the nurses wanted to poison me. That I couldn't trust anyone but him." She paused, then continued, her voice catching just a little. "And I believed him. I trusted him. I gave him everything he wanted, my time, my attention, even my body. My throat tightened, but I didn't look away. I cheated on my husband because I was convinced I had to," she said, eyes flicking toward me just for a second. "Because Levi said it would keep me safe. That if I gave in to what he wanted, he'd protect me from the people trying to kill me." There were gasps in the gallery. A few attorneys scribbled furiously. Levi, across the room, kept his face blank, but I saw the tick in his jaw. "Good. Let it burn." Rachel kept going. She told them about the gifts he gave her. The things he whispered. The way he'd isolate her every time she made progress with a therapist or tried to reconnect with me. "He used my illness like a leash," she said. "And he wrapped it around my neck." Harper was in the back row, arms folded tightly, lips pressed into a line so sharp it could have drawn blood. I wondered what she was feeling. Regret? Anger? Or just fear that the story she built was crumbling in public? When Rachel stepped down, the room was so quiet you could hear the bailiff breathe. I met her by the side exit. We didn't hug. We didn't say much. I just took her hand. "You did it," I whispered. Her lip trembled, but she nodded. I told the truth. And for someone who'd spent so long trapped in lies, hers, mine, Levi's, her mother's, that truth might as well have been a miracle. Things moved quickly after that. Levi's attorney requested a settlement conference almost immediately, offering a financial payout and a quiet resolution. But we said no. We wanted this public. We wanted the board to strip his license. We wanted his name out there for every woman and patient to see. And privately? I wanted him ruined. Legally. Financially. Forever. Harper, meanwhile, went dark. She stopped calling. Her lawyer withdrew the motion to declare me mentally unfit. Whether that was out of guilt or self-preservation, I'll never know. I got a single envelope in the mail from her 2 weeks later. Inside was a folded-up note. I thought I was protecting her. I didn't see what he was doing. I failed her. I failed you. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Some apologies come too late. Rachel started painting again. Not professionally, just in the garage, where she set up a few canvases and an old stool. They weren't bright pictures. Mostly dark swirls and tangled shapes. But one of them caught my eye, a house on fire, and a woman walking away with her back turned and her head high. I like that one, I said one morning. She looked over at it and smiled softly. Yeah, she said. Me too. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch and talk about everything that happened, sometimes not. There were still bad nights. She'd wake up sweating. She'd check the locks. She'd pace and mutter when a car idled too long outside. But she'd always come back to bed. And she always told me what she was feeling. That was more than I'd gotten in years. One night, I asked her, "Do you think we'll ever be normal again?" She thought about it for a moment. "No," she said. "But I think we can be better." That answer stuck with me. Because maybe normal is just a myth we chase until we realize all we really want is peace. And maybe peace isn't quiet. Maybe it's messy. Full of cracks. Full of haunted memories and battles fought in silence. But it's real. Rachel and I had been to the bottom. We'd been torn apart by things neither of us fully understood. But she was trying now. I was too. And in the end, maybe that was enough. I used to think the word forgiveness sounded too soft. Like it was something fragile, something delicate and easily broken. It felt too light for the damage that had been done between me and Rachel. But somewhere along the way, after the court dust settled and the media lost interest, I realized forgiveness isn't soft. It's damn hard. And it's not for the faint of heart. A month after Rachel's testimony, Levi Cray lost his license. The ethics board shredded him during their hearing, dragging out years of manipulated patience, hushed settlements, and predatory behavior hidden behind a facade of care. We didn't even need to go to trial after that. He settled out of court with a payout big enough to cover Rachel's treatments for the next decade, plus a hefty sum for punitive damages. I didn't touch a cent of it. Didn't want it. All I wanted was for him to disappear, and he did. Last I heard, he moved out of state. Rumor was, he changed his name. Good. Let the man rot in obscurity. Harper, Rachel's mother, finally showed up again, knocking on our door like nothing had happened. She had a casserole in one hand and fake concern in her eyes. I didn't answer. Rachel did. I listened from the hallway. "You let him poison me," Rachel told her calmly, voice steady like polished steel. "You wanted to believe he was saving me, so you ignored the signs. You blamed my husband instead of asking me what was really going on." Rachel didn't let her. "You don't get to come back just because I'm healing," she said. "Healing means learning to protect myself, from everyone. Even you." The door shut softly. Rachel stood there a long while after, not crying, not shaking. Just breathing. "I'm proud of you," I whispered. She turned, looked at me, and gave me a nod that said I'm proud of me too. We sold the old house a few weeks later. Too many memories there. Too many shadows in the corners that whispered of things we'd both rather forget. We moved to a little place on the edge of town, a ranch-style home with a small garden, just big enough for the life we were rebuilding. Rachel planted sunflowers. I fixed up the porch. And every morning, we'd sit outside with 2 mugs of coffee, not saying much. Just watching the light shift across the grass. Sometimes, she'd sketch while I read. Sometimes, we'd sit in silence. It was peaceful. Real peace. One night, months later, I woke up to find her sitting at the edge of the bed. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. She shook her head. "Had a dream." "Bad one?" She looked over her shoulder. "I dreamed I cheated on you again." I sat up, rubbing my eyes. "It was just a dream." "But I did do it," she said, her voice soft. "More than once. And you were always good to me. Always patient. I don't deserve that." I reached for her hand and brought it to my chest. "You were sick," I said. "Sicker than anyone gave you credit for. Including me. But I still made those choices." "I know. And I forgave you." Her shoulders trembled slightly. "Why?" I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, "Because I remember who you were before all of it. And I see who you're trying to be now." She finally turned to face me, eyes glistening in the moonlight. "I don't know if I can ever make it up to you," she whispered. "You don't have to," I said. "Just stay. Just keep trying." And she did. Day by day. Some were harder than others. There were setbacks, relapses, therapy sessions that left her drained and raw. But there was also laughter again. Little moments, like her humming while she cooked or the way she'd curl up next to me when we watched old movies. Love, I learned, isn't always romantic. Sometimes it's just being there when no one else would be. I went back to the courtroom once, just to sit in the back, quietly, like a ghost in my own past. I watched a young lawyer stumble through a cross-examination. He was green, nervous, sweating through his collar. I almost stood up to help him. Old habits, I guess. But I didn't. Because that chapter of my life was over. I wasn't the big-time closer anymore. I was just a man who'd made it out of the wreckage with the woman he loved, damaged but standing. And that, somehow, felt like enough. Rachel's paintings changed over time. They got brighter. Still messy, still layered, but with more color. Less fire, more sky. One of them she hung above our bed, a pair of hands reaching across a river, fingertips just barely touching. "Us," she said, when I asked about it. I smiled. "Yeah. Us." Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering everything, the pain, the betrayal, the illness, the fear, and choosing to stay anyway. Choosing to fight together. Choosing to hope. It's not easy. But nothing worth it ever is.